All right, it is good to see everybody. How's everybody's week going? Good? Good? Long? I understand. All right, do we have any prayer requests this evening before we get started? Yeah, Beth.
Remember Eugene and Margaret? He's still in the hospital, and they don't really know where he's going or when.
Remember Eugene and Margaret, okay. Yeah, Johnny.
So better half is home today. She had a procedure that went pretty well, but she's also got a pretty severe headache, so she's taking.
Okay, so let's remember Connie. She's recovering and has got a bad headache tonight too. We want to praise Jessica that your mom's procedure went well. How's she doing today? Came home a couple hours ago. So they end up only having to do one stent, which was great. They originally intended to do two, and they were hoping that it wasn't so bad they'd have to come back and do open heart again. And she ended up only having to have one stent, and she's back home today, so that's great. Glad to hear that. Anybody else this evening? Yeah, John.
Grandma had an episode. They took her to Cincinnati to get evaluated for Alzheimer's medication, something to get her calmed down. And she'll be in Cincinnati for possibly 2 weeks to evaluate what to do with her next. I guess it took 2 deputy sheriffs to get her out of the place and get her an ambulance.
Well, bless her heart. So
They didn't name her Rocky Balboa, I guess.
she's coming out swinging, huh?
Yeah.
So remember your grandma and all her situations.
Grandpa's.
Is he back home or is he still?
Yeah, he's taking himself out of lab.
I thought he did. Okay. All right. So
Let the kids take care of grandma.
so let's remember both his grandma and grandpa. Goodness. All right. Bless you. Anybody else? Any other prayer requests this evening? Any unspoken requests? Quite a few. All right. Don, would you open us up with a word of prayer?
Let's pray. Father, we come to you tonight, God. We want to thank you for another beautiful day you've given us. Lord, we thank you for all the blessings of life. God, we just thank you for being able to come tonight to look at your word, to be able to learn something, Lord, to study. And God, that we can be together as a group. And we'll have a fellowship with each and every brother and sister. So we ask that you bless Ben. That tonight as he brings a message. This all special requests to talk about, Lord. And we will all give you praise. In Jesus' name.
Amen. All right, we are in Exodus chapter 32, starting in verse 11 tonight. And so last week we got all the way through. Moses gets his final instructions from God. Pull this game down just a little bit, John. He gets through his final instructions with God. God gives him the tablets, he's sending him down the mountain, and right about the time he's sending down the mountain, what's going on? Idol worship's going on, right? Aaron has severely dropped the ball, right? And so he's up on Mount Sinai talking with God. The Israelites have Aaron make them this idol gold. And if we remember correctly, Aaron was the one who came up with this idea, right? He said, you all go get me all your gold. And it said, and he fashioned a calf, right? And then made it, okay? All right. But now, how's God feel about them? He wants to destroy them, okay? And so he basically says, Moses, get out my way, okay? I'm going to go down here and destroy these people so that I can make a nation out of you, all right? And I want you to catch that because he says, I'm going to make a nation out of you. And Moses, we're going to see, actually contest that. He's like, no, that's not, like, I don't think that's right. I don't think that's what we want to do here, okay? And so I think sometimes we do need to recognize it's okay to speak our heart to God. He knows what you're going to say beforehand, right? Even if you don't like what he's doing or question what he's doing, that's okay sometimes, as long as we still are obedient in the end. Do what? No. We cannot change God's mind. There is no shadow of turning with God. All right. So we're in chapter 32, starting with verse 11. So God has just said, they're stiff-necked people. Leave me alone. I'm going to go down there, and my wrath is going to burn against them and consume them. All right. And so now, verse 11 says, but Moses implored the Lord his God and said, O Lord, why does your wrath burn hot against your people, whom you have brought out of the land of Egypt with great power and with a mighty hand? Why should the Egyptians say, with evil intent did he bring them out, to kill them in the mountains and to consume them from the face of the earth? Turn from your burning anger and relent from this disaster against your people. remember Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, or Jacob, your servants, to whom you swore by your own self and said to them, I will multiply your offspring as the stars of heaven. In all this land that I promised I will give to your offspring, and they shall inherit it forever. And the Lord relented from the disaster that he had spoken of, bringing on his people. All right, so now why does Moses bring, so Moses could have been like, sweet, get them. You know, I want a nation after me. I want Moses land, right? Mosesville. But he didn't. He immediately goes back and reminds God, not that God had to be reminded, but he goes back and he tells God, hey, look, why would you do this? Why would you kill them? Why would you destroy them? And what was his argument? He made a promise, right? He made a covenant with Abraham, and he said, why would you kill the people you brought out of Egypt? Like, you brought them out for this purpose, right? And it wasn't just to bring them out of Egypt. It was to fulfill the promise he made to who? To Abraham, right? And I think sometimes it's easy for us to just move away from what we know to be God's truth and God's promises because it's easier or because we want judgment too. Because we're going to see in a minute, Moses tries to stop God from judging them, and then when Moses goes down there, his anger begins burning against them, right? And that's what we want to do, is that we want to be the judge, right? And so here we have Moses pleads with God to save the Israelites. And I think this is really interesting because remember, Moses is the mediator of the old covenant, right? Who's the mediator of the new covenant? Jesus, right? Jesus was the prophet like Moses to come. And so here we have Moses, though he knows these people don't deserve God's salvation right now, right? He knows that they're being wicked and they're worshiping idols, and yet he still stands in the way and says, please don't kill this people. You made a promise, right? And so think about Jesus on the cross, right? He says, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing, right? He stood in the way when God could have easily poured. All the wrath he pours out on Jesus was ours to take, right? And yet Jesus stands in the way on their behalf. And so we see this kind of foreshadowing in Moses here. And so he goes on to say that you made this covenant, right? And not only that, he says, what are the Egyptians going to say? If you do this, if you go down there and kill them, what can the Egyptians now say about you? That you're an evil God. Not only did you kill the people that were oppressing them, but you just brought them out into the wilderness so you could kill them there, right? Now, all throughout the Old Testament, God punishes Israel and does things to correct Israel's behavior because he will not allow his name to be defamed. He will not allow his name to be spoken ill of, right? There are times when he actually brings Israel back when they don't deserve it because he's like, my name will be glorified, right? It's all about his glory and these things. And so Moses recalls this covenant God made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, though he refers to him as Israel. And in the parentheses there on your worksheet, what this does is it points out that Moses rejects the offer to become a nation, right? Because who is the nation of God? His people. His people, period, are the nation. Now, can it come through Moses? Yeah, it can come down through that line, right? That promise of Abraham coming down through him, but it's not a biological promise anymore. We know that. Romans makes it very clear. It's a belief, a faith promise that makes us children of Abraham. Amen. And so we continue on. He says, so the Lord relents from this disaster, okay? And so when we talk about this, that he gave them this land, that verse, this is back in verse 13. I'll multiply your offspring as the stars of heaven, and this land I promised I will give to your offspring, and they will inherit it forever, right? And so do they get this promised land forever? The land of Canaan? No, they don't have it right now, right? They don't have it right now. But it's why? Because they broke their covenant with God. They broke their covenant with God, so he established a new covenant. And now we have a better country waiting for us, which is what Abraham believed. We read that in Hebrews, a heavenly one. Okay? And so he says, then Moses turned and went down from the mountain, right? So Moses is like, okay, I saved him. Shoo, got that taken care of. Moses turns and goes down from the mountain with the 2 tablets of the testimony in his hand, the 10 commandments, right? Tablets that were written on both sides, on the front and back, they're written. So that's a misconception we have, and oftentimes when we see the 10 commandments posted, right? We see all 10 on the front, like 5 and 5, but it was written on both sides of this, okay? And so he's coming down there, and Faith was the first one that brought this to my attention, and this was like when we first started talking about this. But who's still hanging out on the mountain right now, waiting for Moses to come down? Joshua, right? Joshua's just kind of like, he is completely out of the loop. You know what I mean? Like, Moses at least got the inside track from God, right? God tells him what's going on. Joshua's just like, when are you coming back? You know? And so he's waiting. So here comes Moses with these 2 tablets he didn't have beforehand, right? With all these laws written on them, with the 10 Commandments written on them. And so he comes down there, and it says that when Joshua heard the noise of the people as they shouted, he said to Moses, there is a noise of war in the camp, right? He says, but it's not the sound of shouting for victory or the sound of the cry of defeat, but the sound of singing that I hear. And so that means that Joshua knows what war sounds like, right? So here he is. He's like, from a distance, he's like, that doesn't sound like they're rejoicing for victory, and that doesn't sound like they're mourning or from defeat. He's like, they're singing. Like, there's singing going on down there, right? And so it says, as soon as he came near the camp and saw the golden calf and the dancing, Moses' anger burned hot. And he threw the tablets out of his hands and broke them at the foot of the mountain. Okay? So I do want to point something out. So it's not just that they're worshiping this idol. It's also how they're worshiping this idol, right? Because it's not like they were just dancing, like doing the waltz. You know, like that's not what we're talking about, right? They are doing some sort of paganistic ritual that they probably have seen and learned where? In Egypt, right? In Egypt, right? And so, and we're going to see kind of a glimpse into this in just a second when Moses begins to question his brother, right? So you come down this hill from God. You've just saved their life, literally, right? And you come down and you see it for yourself. And this is kind of the question that Sammy brought up last week about him coming down, like getting so angry. And what would be your response if you were Moses coming down and seeing this go on, this pagan worship going on that could be heard from a long way off? How would you feel if you're Moses? Yeah, like get them. You know, like I take it back. Mosesville sounds great. You know, like let's do it. How about the rest of you? How would you feel if you're coming down and you saw that? Oh, what'd you say? Disappointed. Yeah. Screaming. I wish I'd seen this in person, all right? But I've heard this story so many times that whatever water park y'all were at where you had to go, he thought Leah was, that you weren't down there? At Myrtle Beach. Leah's coming down a water slide. She's a little girl, right? And Don's the one putting her down the water slide, but he can't see Kathy at the bottom. And he thinks that Leah's just going down there by herself and that no one there to catch her, no lifeguard, no nothing. So here he goes off barefoot through the shrubbery, through the mulch and everything. And he said, and Kathy's just waiting down there. She sees him running, you know, like coming down. And he comes just barreling through there, blood and mulch and everything in the water to try to catch her when she gets down there. That's how I feel like Moses will be coming down that hill. Except angry, you know, like, I can't believe you, like hitting them with, like Andrew said when he commented today, busting those tablets over their head. There was a lifeguard. But I didn't see her. You didn't see her, clearly. That was because mulch was in your face. But we see clearly that, and just say that Moses is really, really upset, right? Not just because of what they're doing. I mean, that's the main reason. But because these are the people that God has brought them all the way to this point. Like, how quickly do we forget what God has done in our own lives? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like we have the memory of a goldfish about what God has done for us. It's like, oh, he's not going to show up, though he's never not showed up. Like, he's got a 100% attendance rate. He's always there. And yet, they forget and very quickly do this. Because remember now, they made this calf. I shouldn't say they. Aaron makes this calf, and then what does he tell the people to do the next day? They're going to have a feast for the Lord, right? They're going to worship an idol and have a feast for the Lord, right? As if this is something that pleases God, right? And so we see in verse 20, after he throws the tablets down, breaks them at the foot of the mountain. I mean, you ever done something you've been so mad that you didn't realize what you did until after you calmed down? You know what I mean? Like he gets, because I don't think in his right mind he'd have been like, I'm going to take these gifts that God has given me, etched with his own hand, and I'm going to break them. You know, like I don't think he would do that on purpose. He was so angry, he just throws these down and breaks them at the mountain. And part of that could be symbolic in the sense that, like, what's the even point of this? They broke the first one. I mean, right out of the gate, they broke the first one right out of the gate. Like, what's the point? And so he gets mad, he breaks it down. But I love what he does here. Like, this is a leader right here, okay? So he says, he takes the calf that they had made, burns it with fire, grounds it into powder, scatters it on the water, and made the people of Israel drink it.
And I bet it was so good.
I bet it was too. That was not a good drink packet, you know. And but you got to think the symbolism there, though. When we partake of sin, when we partake of something that is not of God, like, we consume that, good or bad. We consume that thing. And this is what Moses is essentially saying. He's like, this is what you want, you're going to get it. You take this. You take this medicine. You know, and as a kid, I could have taste tested soap for you. I could have blindfold taste tested soap for you. As many times as I got in trouble, talked back or whatever. And it wasn't for my mom, it was my babysitter. Okay? I can remember spitting bubbles from Dawn liquid soap, right? But if you think about the Christmas story, right? When Ralphie says what he says, right? When he says it and the nuts go flying and he says a bad word, and his mom takes that, like, was it palm olive, and sticks that piece of soap in his mouth, right? Because that bar of soap sticks it in his mouth, and it's terrible, tastes terrible. He's like, blah, you know. Here we have them, because of their sin, Moses is making them take it. Like, you're not going to rejoice in this. This is going to be bitter. This is going to be something you wish you had never done. But, like, when we think about that, some people today would think that's inappropriate. You should not treat people like that. You shouldn't behave that way. But I don't think we treat idolatry the way we should treat idolatry. I really don't. He came down the mountain, because keep in mind, if you've seen, I heard it like this the other day, if you see, white cotton in the midst of other clothes, that white cotton looks really, really white, right? But if you take it outside after a pure snow, it doesn't look so white anymore, based on what it's compared to. And so Moses has just come from the literal presence of God, right? And so Aaron's been with these people this whole time. So he's with their griping and their complaining, and he's kind of in the midst of all this sinfulness and kind of lukewarmness. Moses has been in God's presence. And he comes from that to this and sees this going on. How stark of a contrast, right? How stark of a contrast. How easily are we just kind of just watered down and kind of almost like inoculated to some of the sin that goes on in the world today. Because it's just part of our lives, it's part of the world around us, we just kind of see it and we go on. But Moses sees this and he's like, I've seen the real thing. I don't want anything to do with this. This is not okay. And he goes down there and deals with it. And we see in Matthew chapter 18, this kind of gives us a better understanding of Jesus' teaching when he teaches this. Like, sin, wickedness, idolatry, it is a cancer that has to be removed. And that's why he says, woe to the world for temptations to sin. He says it's necessary that temptations come, but woe to the one by whom they come. He says, if your hand or foot causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It's better for you to enter life crippled or lame than with 2 hands or 2 feet to be thrown into the eternal fire. And if your eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. It's better for you to enter life with 1 eye than for 2 eyes to be thrown into the hell of fire. And so we read that, we're like, that's extreme. But is it? Is it? Is it really that extreme? Because if your family, let's just make this a real serious thing here. If someone breaks into your home and you know your family's life is at stake, right? Are you gonna do everything you can to save them, or after 1 lick, are you just gonna sit back and be like, that hurt too much, I'll just do what you're gonna do? You're gonna fight to the death to do this, right? Why? Because it matters that much. And if we don't treat God with the worthiness he deserves, then we're going to allow anything to kind of creep in on that and just sit back and be like, it's not that big a deal. It's not that big a deal. And so here's Moses setting the example for us that idolatry will not be tolerated at all. At all, right? Because what we'll do is we'll watch stuff, or we'll see people post stuff, or we'll see something on TV, or we'll see something out in society, and we'll be like, man, those people are crazy. They shouldn't be doing that. Like, why are we not saying, that is not okay, I'm going to do something about that? Well, I can tell you why. We're like, I don't want to get in trouble with the law. I don't want people to say something about our family. I don't want to lose my job. I don't want to do this. But listen, when we start to doubt that God will provide for us if we stand up for him, then maybe we're not worshiping him. We have to understand that he is going to take care of those who are faithful to him. It may not be the way you think he should take care of you, but he will take care of you, because this life is not all there is. It's not all there is. We're preparing for the next one. And this is convicting to me. I'm not preaching at you all. I'm talking to myself. So then he goes on. So now Moses, he makes it down there. And notice he doesn't even ask any questions first. You catch this part of it? He didn't ask any questions. He went down there, took the thing, burned it, ground it up, made them drink it. And he's like, all right, now, Aaron, come here. And he brings his brother to him. In verse 21, he says, what did this people do to you that you have brought such a great sin upon them? All right? Think about that. What do you think about that question? Well, remember, think about the question he's asking. Like, what did this people do to you? Like, did they coerce you? Did they really offend you? What happened that you would bring this great sin upon them? Right? And then Aaron, knowing he's caught dead to rights, right? I mean, because he's like, yeah, who brought that calf down here? Like, how dare you all, you bunch of heathens? Like, it says that Aaron, much like Adam in the garden, says, Aaron said, let not the anger of my Lord burn hot. In other words, don't get mad at me. Don't get mad at me, right? How many times do we try to get out of stuff because we think somebody is close to us, or they shouldn't get mad at us? It wasn't us that did it, right? But he says, you know the people, right? Well, he is people, right? Aaron is people. He says, you know the people, that they are set on evil. For they said to me, make us gods who shall go before us. As for this Moses, the man who brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we don't know what's become of him. So I said to them, let any who have gold take it off. So they gave it to me, and I threw it into the fire, and out came this calf. Right. It's a goose. He's acting like it was a magic trick, right? But let's go back to chapter 32 with verse 4. If we can pull that up there. Chapter 32, verse 4, he says, and he, Aaron, received the gold from their hand and fashioned it with a graving tool and made a golden calf. And so he literally was like carving this thing out, and he's like, Moses, I don't know how this happened, man. I just threw all that gold in there and like, poof, this calf came out, right? Moses doesn't buy that, right? He doesn't buy that. And so verse 25, when Moses saw that the people had broken loose, and what does your translation say? That's the ESV, broken loose. What does the rest of y'all's? What? We're running wild, unrestrained, out of control. Right. What does King Jimmy say? Naked. Okay. Some of y'all are like, well, that's different. Okay. That's actually more along the lines of what they're saying here. Because remember, he comes down. I told you, he didn't get so. It wasn't just that they had a golden calf out there. It's what they were doing with that. They were dancing. They were because again, they weren't doing the waltz, and Moses was like, how dare you? There's not they were probably doing these dances and rituals that they'd seen in Egypt with all these other gods, and oftentimes those were either nude or very scantily clad. And they were out there acting like pure pagan heathens, right? Worshiping this thing, going naked. And he's like, when Moses saw that they had gone loose, gone wild, right? That they were unruly, that they were running around, dancing around naked, right? Because then, what does it say here? Because they're worshiping this false god. So would their enemies make fun of them for worshiping a false god while the enemies themselves worship false gods? That wouldn't be the instance. It's how they're doing it. That the enemies begin to shame them for this. And he says, in the parentheses, when Moses saw the people had broken loose or were running around naked or were unruly or were wild, for Aaron had let them do this to the derision of their enemies. That word derision means like the whispering, right, or the shaming of them. So now God's enemies are talking bad about the people, that people are shaming themselves in front of them publicly. And so, because remember, nudity in an improper manner was shameful. I mean, think back to the priest. What was one thing the priest had to have specially made for them? Holy undies, right? They had to make special underwear for the priests so that when they stepped over the altar or did anything like that, nothing was exposed, right? And so now here these people are being completely exposed in front of everybody, including their enemies. And now their enemies are whispering or having derisions about them, speaking ill of them, that they're shaming themselves, right? So this is, Moses is like, I've had enough. I've had enough. And so this is what, like, this is a tough thing right here, but this goes to tell you that sometimes there are going to be people in your camp who don't need to be in your camp. People in your camp who are going to be part of the group, but they're not going to act like part of the group. They're going to try to bring down part of the group. Even sometimes those people are really close to you, like a brother, right? And so here we have Moses stands in the gate of the camp, and he says, who is on the Lord's side? Come to me. Now, I want you to just imagine the scene for a minute. Not too much, but just a little bit, right? Moses is standing at this gate. He's broken the tablets. He's mad as all get out. Joshua's with him, right? Joshua's hanging with him. And he looks at this mess going on of these hundreds of thousands of people that are there, and he sees them running around naked and screaming and dancing and singing and doing all stuff, and this golden calf that they were doing. And they're all just bewildered. And he's like, listen, whoever's on God's side, get over here. Almost like he drew a line in the sand, right? He's like, get over here. And who shows up? The Levites do, right? Why? That's his people. Moses is a Levite, right? And so these people show up. It says, all the sons of Levi gathered around him. I wonder where Aaron was. Aaron's like, me too, you know. Like, so all the sons of Levi gather around him, and look at what Moses says to him. He's not like, thanks, guys, let's leave. Let's leave them to their wickedness. No, Moses deals with wickedness, right? He already came and destroyed the object of the worship, right? And so he tells them, he says, put your sword on your side, each of you. Go to and from gate to gate throughout the camp, and each of you kill his brother and his companion and his neighbor. Right? That's how serious sin is. That's how serious wickedness is. When Jesus says, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees, their hypocrisy, because what does leaven do? A little bit goes through the whole loaf. All it would take is 1, 2, 3, 4 people within your congregation to create such problems that your entire congregation becomes poisoned and dies. That's all it takes. And so, yeah. I didn't even see you sneak in, Mac. You're like a ninja. We assume they didn't. If they did, they immediately quit.
So then we assume that they killed maybe the ringleader, or
That would be my assumption, that they killed whoever was continuing. No, they definitely didn't kill everybody because they only killed 3,000 people. But I think the point was made. You know, they came around, you know, however many there were of the Levites, went around and killed all these people. So I'm assuming at some point while they're in the midst of this, these people, again, this is my assumption, it's not what it says, that when they start seeing people die because of the sin that they're doing, some people are like, put my clothes back on, you know, like they stop what they're doing. But they killed 3,000 of them across the camp. We are in, all right, verse 29. And the sons of Levi did according to the word of Moses. And that day about 3,000 men of the people fell. And Moses said, today you have been ordained for the service of the Lord, each one at the cost of his son and of his brother, so that he might bestow a blessing upon you this day. Now, can anybody think of a teaching that Jesus gave us in regards to serving him that would be somewhat similar to this? You must hate your mother, hate your father, even hate yourself, your own life, to follow after me. And he said, I didn't come to bring peace, but to bring what? A sword. Father against son, right? Brother against brother. Like that was what was going to happen. Jesus didn't come just to bring peace. He came to bring peace to those who were going to respond to God, between them and God. But with the world, he's going to create enmity between the world and his people, right? And that didn't matter. Like bloodlines don't matter then, right? Spirit is thicker than blood when it comes to being a follower of Jesus. And so it's not too dissimilar here when we see that there's going to be a division within the people of who's going to follow God and who's not. That's no different than in the new covenant, okay? All right. Yeah. That's a literal, yeah. Multiple times God says, if you don't do what I say, you'll be cut off from your people. And this is the literal version of that. Like, you'll be removed from your people, absolutely, okay? And so he says that they've been ordained on this day. Now, we definitely don't ordain people this way here at this church, okay? Right? Is that what you want to do next time, Darren? You want to have a sword fight? But he says now that they're going to serve. And this is one of the reasons why we see that the Levites are now the priests from here on out. Right? They're now the priests from here on out. They're the ones who stood for God in this time. So verse 30, it says, the next day Moses said to the people, I mean, can you imagine even going to bed that night? I mean, think, like, how would you sleep after you just watch this whole debacle go down? Your belly's probably hurting from drinking, gold water. And you've watched these guys, people you know, kill these other people you know, and Moses is like, God will bless you for that. All right, I'll talk to you all tomorrow. And the next day he speaks to them, and he says, you have sinned a great sin, and now I will go to the Lord. Perhaps I can make atonement for your sin. If that's not a Christological foreshadowing, I don't know what is. You have sinned a great sin against God. I will go in order to make atonement for you. I will go. The mediator of this covenant, I will go and try to make atonement for you, right? Which is exactly what Jesus did do for us. All right. And so let me back up just a little bit. I skipped a question on your worksheet. So let's go back to where they're acting the fool and they're doing all this stuff and they're shaming themselves before their enemies. How are some ways that you see the church at large doing that today? By our behavior, the things we do or don't do, the things we say or don't say, how we behave or don't, is causing shame to be brought upon the church by the outside world. What are some things that you can see today? Fighting within different denominations, absolutely. Absolutely. It shows a church divided, right? Because there's only one church. What else? Right. So, but yes, absolutely. Some congregations are going woke as far as their liberality and the things they're ordaining and the things they're allowing and the things they're promoting, right, are most certainly anti-biblical. What else? Not living it out? Yeah, not living out what a Christian lifestyle is supposed to be. And it's interesting to me that the world typically has a higher standard for Christians than Christians do for Christians. Right? That they will be like, that's not Christian of you. It's like, well, how do you even know? And so they will hold you to a higher standard. But what? You did when you were a non-believer?
Well, I was Christian. I saw everything Christian.
Why do you think that was? Why do you think you were judgmental of Christians before you were one? Right. And it's just a reminder, guys, like, people are watching you. People are watching, whether you like it or not. That's just our baptistry heater going crazy. Just ignore it, okay? People are watching you whether you like it or not, right? If we acknowledge him before people, God will acknowledge, or Jesus will acknowledge us before God. So people should know that we're Christians, not because we carry a Bible with us, but by the way we talk, by the way we interact with them, by the way we love them, by the way we ask for forgiveness when we make mistakes. Like, we're not perfect, but we're trying to live like that. We're trying to live like him. And so when we don't do what we're supposed to do, especially when we worship other things, I can tell you this for one, and I've told you a story before, but when I went to that ball game, when Leah was, she was either, I think maybe Carter was very, very little, and I went to a ball game, a regional tournament game, and I went nuts at this basketball game. I mean, I ate poor Wendell Wallen, I ate him alive from the stands, right? I know, I apologize later, okay? But I ate him alive from the stands. I mean, I was hanging over the rails. I was acting a fool. And the next day after school, Leah goes, what did you do at that game? Because she had people coming to her at school, other employees, saying, you should have seen your husband last night, right? You talk about conviction. So I was like, that's why a lot of times I don't go to sporting events, because I'm like, I'm not going to ruin my witness over a sporting event. Not going to do it. Not going to do it. because we have to think like people are watching. They want you to make a mistake. The world wants you to slip up, because the moment you slip up, it gives them room to not have to follow that. It gives them an excuse to not have to go towards Jesus, because they're like, I can mess up just like you can. I don't need Jesus. We are called to be high, to live better, to live higher than those things. And so we see that in here, and we see that today too. All right, so moving back down. So Moses is like, I'm going to go try to make atonement for it. So we're back at verse 31. So Moses makes his way to the Lord. Can you imagine that trip back up the mountain? You know, my parents paid for me to go play in a golf tournament one time. I was a freshman in college, and it was during the summer, and it was a tournament in Madisonville, Kentucky, which is like way far away, okay? And so because I didn't want to get up at like 2 in the morning and drive there, a friend of mine went to Kentucky Wesleyan in Owensboro. And she had a roommate or a sorority sister who was like, he can stay at my apartment, and that's an hour away. And I was like, cool. I don't know who this is, but I'll stay there, right? Real pretty girl. So I stayed up all night talking to her, went to bed like 2 in the morning, and I overslept. And I missed my tea time, right? And I drove 100 miles an hour for an hour straight to get there, and I was late, and I was disqualified, right? My parents paid over $100 to put me in that tournament. So I had a 4-hour drive back home to figure out how I was going to tell my parents that I just burned their $100, right? And how I was going to make up for it. And listen, that was a while ago, and $100 was worth more back then than it is right now. And I felt terrible about it. And just thinking about how was I going to do this when it was 100% my fault, it was all on me. That was a long trip home. It felt longer than 4 hours. Now imagine Moses having to walk back up this hill after he saved these people, right? The last time he talked to God, you got to save them, they're your people. And now he's coming back up. One, he's coming up empty-handed, right? Because the very thing God gave him to help these people get it right, he broke. And so now he's got to go back to God empty-handed. So this is a long trip back up this mountain. He says, Moses returned to the Lord and said, alas, I think that's appropriate, right? Alas, okay, this people has sinned a great sin. They have made for themselves gods of gold. Is it not ironic that he's telling God exactly what God just told him when he went down the foot? And God's like, oh, really? Did they? You know? And he's like, this is what they did. They made these gods of gold. But now, if you will forgive their sin, but if not, please blot me out of your book that you have written. All right? So how do you take that? How do you take Moses saying that? He's saying, look, please, God, forgive them. But if you're not going to forgive them, then blot me out of the book. How do you take him saying that? How do you take that phrase? Felt responsible for him? Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, how many here have ever had, whether it be a son, a daughter, a niece, a nephew, a grandchild, they do something and you feel like it's your fault that they did it, like you failed them, like you messed up, right? It was your fault that this happened. And so here's Moses saying, look, if you can't forgive them, God, then I don't deserve to be forgiven either. Like, blot me out of the book, right? Not quite the same as Paul, right? Because what did Paul say about Israel? He's like, God, I would gladly switch places with them. Because Paul knows he's in the right with God because of Jesus. And all of Israel rejected Jesus. And he's like, if I could switch places so that they'd be saved, I'd do it. But I can't, right? And so here's Moses asking this, and God, again, just ignores him. He ignores this request, right? Because God knows what he's going to do. And so listen to what he says here. But the Lord said to Moses, whoever has sinned against me, I will blot out of my book. But now go, lead the people to the place about which I have spoken to you. Behold, my angel shall go before you. Nevertheless, in the day when I visit, I will visit their sin upon them. Then the Lord sent a plague on the people because they made the calf, the one that Aaron made. And so I think this would imply in here that not everybody in there sinned against God. That not everybody, but he's like, the ones that did, they will be the ones who are punished, right? And he sends this plague upon them. Doesn't really tell us what the plague is, but he sends a plague upon them. And we know from the other 10, none of them are good. You know, they didn't have to endure any of those 10, and now they're going to have to. But I want to point something out here that when when he replies, whoever sins against him, he'll blot out of his book. The only time we really hear about him blotting any names out of a book is in regard to the Lamb's Book of Life. Okay? In Revelation 3, verse 5, and there's some implications of this theologically that we need to understand. So Revelation chapter 3, verse 5, he's writing this to one of the churches, and Jesus is telling John to write this. And he says, the one who conquers or overcomes or endures until the end, right? This is the one who makes it to the end, will be clothed in white garments, and I will never blot his name out of the book of life, right? So in order for our name to remain in the book, we have to do what? Endure until the end, right? We have to endure until the end, be faithful until the end. He says, I will confess his name before my Father and before his angels. But we see this other passage in chapter 13 that seems to be problematic when it comes to our theology. So chapter 13, this is when it's talking about the beast and how the beast is going to persecute and cause people to worship his image and take the mark and all this stuff. And it says he was allowed to make war on the saints and to conquer them. And authority was given to the beast over every tribe and people and language and nation. And all who dwell on the earth will worship it, everyone whose name has not been written before the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb who was slain. And so this would seem to imply that there are people's names who are written in the beginning and they will never be removed, right? That all these names are there forever and cannot be removed. And so this is a passage that I've just seen just recently, who friends of mine who are Calvinist, Reformed, 5-point, you cannot lose your salvation, you're saved until the end, would say right there, there's never going to be a name added or taken away from the Lamb's Book of Life. But what did we just see happen here in Exodus? All of those were God's people, yes or no? At this point, they definitely were. All of Israel, all these ethnic Jews or ethnic Israelites were God's people. Were all of them going to see the promised land? No. Why not? Because of their sin. And so he says, I'm going to blot their name out of my book. Why? Because of their sin, right? And that's for everyone, right? So the Lamb's Book of Life, at the end of the day, like, if you're alive, you have life because who gave it to you? God. God made you alive. You're breathing right now because God gave it to you, right? And so the ones who are going to live in the end are the ones whose names are still in that book, right? They're going to be the ones that have eternal life forever. And so what can God do? He can mark your name out. Why? Because of disobedience, because of sin. And the only way that we get to stay in that book is because of Jesus, because we get his name. That's what keeps us in his book of life, right? And so when we're looking at this, we see God making it very clear to Moses, if you sin, if you are disobedient to me, I will mark your name out of this book. But we know that's why he tells those people in Revelation 3, if you endure until the end, I'll give you white garments to wear, so that's that holy robe, right, that you'll wear at the wedding. But he says what? I won't blot your name out, implying that he could do what? He could blot your name out, right? Because if that's not a threat, and I don't mean like, if that's not a possible punishment, it has no teeth, right? If God says, if you do this, I won't blot your name out, then the understood implication is if you don't do this, I will. And so if he can blot our name out, then that means we have to be faithful because our only salvation is God. That's it. And through Christ alone, it says he who is able to keep you blameless until the end. That's in the book of Jude. He's able to keep us. That's why we cling to him with everything we have because we have no hope apart from him. Period. We hang on to him. And so we see in here that there are a lot of people already, and this is a short time, they're just now getting the commandments, they're not even close to the promised land yet, that there's already a lot of people who are not going to make it to the promised land. They're not going to receive this gift of life. 3,000 already. 3,000 already that are not going to make it, and there's more to come, an entire generation to come. They're not going to make it. Yeah, Josh.
So could it be a reference to talk about everybody's name and they could be a reference
Bless you.
that everybody when they're born, their name is in, and then if you don't accept Jesus, your name is blotted out?
I think that that's very possible. I think it's very possible. There's not a lot of like explanation to the book of life in Scripture, right? If you read through it, it just says the Lamb's Book of Life. It doesn't really give us a lot of explanation as to when your name is written in it. It just says your name is written in it, right? And so it's very possible that when you become a child of God, it could be written in, or it could be just when you're born, it's written in. It does not say, but we do know that you can be blotted out of it, right? And at the end of the day, you still want your name on the books when it's all said and done. Because when they open the books and read them at the end, you want your name to be called in the book of life. Yeah, Tony. Right. Yes. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And that's Jewish culture and Christian culture. Right. Yeah, I don't have a hard line on this because it doesn't say it. It doesn't explicitly say it.
Here's another point. God's omniscient, and he knows the end from the beginning. He could very well say, those names, I knew from the beginning whose name was going to be there.
I agree. I agree with that 100%.
Because he knows. He has to know.
Yeah, so like when we read Revelation, a lot of times we read it as like this future thing, but it's actually a history book. You thought about this? God's telling us what's already happened. It's going to happen for us, but to him, it's already happened. This is the end from the beginning. Like he already knows it. And so he can look at the end and say, here's all the names that are written in the book. None of those will worship the beast. Right? But that doesn't mean along the way there were more names in the beginning, but they were removed for disobedience as it went. And he's saying all those that are in there, they didn't move. They didn't buckle. They didn't give. They endured until the end, which matches up with what Jesus says in chapter 3. If you endure to the end, I will not blot your name out.
Because he is omniscient, though. He started that ball rolling.
He knew. Right. He knew which DVD he picked out before he put it in the player.
He could see a part of it and all that. This is bigger. We know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Any thoughts on their fall today? Their atonement was going to be themselves. Right? I mean, that's what we have to realize is that sin requires death. Period. Bless you. It requires death, and it's either going to be our death or Jesus' death. Those are the options. And so they're going to atone for their sins. It's just not the way that Moses had hoped. You know. So, any other thoughts on tonight's Bible study?
Aaron was the ringleader of the ringleaders in this debacle.
Yes.
And should have been the first one sprung up. Why do you think he wasn't killed?
Good.
He had power to stop it from the very beginning before he even got started.
You know, like, I think it's a good question. Like, there's times when I wish we could, like, see this, like, play out, because I would have really liked to see Moses' face when him and Aaron were talking to each other. Because, you know your siblings. Like, you know them well. You know when they're lying to you. You know when they're angry. You know when they're scared. Like, I just wonder what that conversation went like. Because I think there was a reason why Moses was supposed to be the leader and not Aaron. Aaron was the spokesperson, right? Moses was the leader. And we see that distinctively in this scene, that Aaron gives in and doesn't lead. He folds because he's always just been doing the one he just does what he's told to do, right? You tell Aaron to say this, to do this. When Aaron's by himself, he's like, you all want me to do that? Okay, I'll do that, right? Then Moses is the one who comes down and is like, what in the world are y'all doing? And he's the one that destroys it. So I don't know why Aaron seemingly gets a pass here, but I don't know. I don't know. I'd say he lived with a little regret.
So at this point, Aaron's been anointed from Moses, or by Moses from God.
Not yet.
Priest, right?
Not yet.
Not yet?
Not yet.
What takes to do? I was gonna say, well, maybe if it's high priest, maybe they can't kill him.
No, so that's a great question because we've read about them being anointed, but remember, that's what was told to Moses while he was with God, and he's just now coming down, and he's not done any of that stuff yet. No. But you know what? Like, it's almost like Aaron can never win another argument, right? Because he's like, I don't want to go there. Most like, you remember Sinai? Like, he's like, sorry. Like he can never win another argument from now on. But he's not been anointed yet. And so we got to keep in mind, too, that the sacrifices they're going to make are going to be for all their sins. And this is important for us. We read this and we're like, what a bunch of fools. We do this stuff all the time, guys. Truly. Like, we do the same thing they do. We just don't have anybody call us out on it. Right? But that's why we need Jesus' blood. And so the sacrifices they make to ordain and consecrate the priest and the temple and all that stuff washes that sin, like forgives them of that sin so they can do the service of God, right? And so it's not because Aaron's innocent, not because he's worthy. God just chooses him, which is good news for us because none of us are worthy. But yet he chooses us. Through the blood, we have an opportunity to serve him. So, but no, I get you. Like, it's like, really? Could we have picked a better candidate? You know, but. You're going to kill animals. You built an animal, you're going to kill them from now on. Well, so that's a great point that you make, because when they say that Jesus, as our high priest, sits down at the right hand of God, that's a significant thing because the other priests never got to sit down because it was a butcher shop. They were constantly killing and sacrificing, offering animals all day long, every day. Like they never got a break. But when Jesus did it once and he sat down, that meant his ministry was better than theirs because it was enough one time, right? So, what'd you say, Cheyenne? Well, think about this though. Like, what did Paul do before he started making Christians? He persecuted, he killed them, right? Stabbed them, right? Okay. So he would kill Christians, right? So did Paul understand well the grace of God when he was ministering to all these people after this? Absolutely, because he knew he was the chief amongst sinners, right? If Aaron truly received the forgiveness of God and knew that forgiveness based on his own sin, how much better of a minister would he be on behalf of these people who were bringing their gifts to him because of their sin, right? He wouldn't be self-righteous. He wouldn't be, how dare you do this? He's like, I understand. Let me go take this for you. Like, it could even be that. Now, that's not what it says, but I'm just, my mindset is we see a lot of correlations between the Old and New Testament, and for him to be a high priest, he has to offer sacrifices for his own sin too. So it's very well aware of his sinfulness before God. So, anybody else? Yes. Yeah, wait. Go ahead. Well, so here's a little play.
That was not an accident. He didn't drop him. He didn't drop him, he threw it.
Okay, so here, but here's the thing. Listen, so listen. Hey, sisters, y'all can take this outside, okay? But now, so think about this for a minute. He broke the tablets, and he smote the rock. Which one of those did he actually break the commandments? When he smote the rock. But he's like one of those middle schoolers. I got to write this again. No, but when you think about this, but this is what it says. We see this and we base it on our perceptions and what we do and how we get away with stuff. It's like disobedience is disobedience, right? So what does God say? Those who disobey will not see it. And so that includes Moses. That's why Jesus had to be perfect to the T. Because the mediator of the old covenant didn't even get to receive the promises of the old covenant, right? And so, like, this is what we gather from this. Like, idol worship, unacceptable, period. No exceptions, no toleration. We're supposed to be tolerant. That's not a biblical practice. We're not supposed to be tolerant of sin. That's not a biblical practice, okay? So we don't tolerate idol worship, and God does not tolerate disobedience. That's why Jesus... So if we think about our sacrifice that was taken for our place, that's for every single sin, big, little, small, and in between, that takes place. Just one was enough for him to have to die on the cross. Just one. And that was for all the sin in the world that he did that. So any little bit of disobedience, that's how much it costs God. That's how much God hates sin. Every little bit. And so even Moses' disobedience of smoting the rock to give the people the water was enough to deserve death and not to get the thing. And so it's like perception. Like we look at him in comparison to all these other heathens he's with. We're like, oh, he's not too bad. But when you put him up against God, we're like, he's terrible. And so are we. You know. So, any other thoughts, questions, comments about tonight's Bible study? We're about to leave Mount Sinai next week. No, I'm going to share it. I'm going to share it online tonight. There's a TikTok video that Zach sent me unaware that was it was an AI production, but it was essentially of Moses commanding the 3,000 to be killed. And he had no idea this is what we were talking about tonight. And he sent it to me, and I was like, do you realize that's the exact passage we're going through? And it's humorous, but it's a portrayal of all this. And Moses comes down. He's like, I've been with God for 40 days, and I come down here, and I come upon a cow with a fan club. Like, he's like, what is happening, right? So I'll share that on the church page tonight. I'm not a huge TikTok person, but this will be the one time I share one with you tonight. So any other comments tonight before we close?
Pastor, I have a praise really quick. My sister just texted me, and she just tested them today, and she is cancer-free.
Praise God. If you didn't hear that, April's sister had sent her a message that she had tested done today, and she is cancer-free. So praise God for that. That's great. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you for sharing that, April. Anybody else? Anything else before we close tonight? Good? It's good to see everybody here. It's a good crowd tonight. All right, well, let's all stand together. Let's go to the Lord in prayer. All right. Samuel, you pray us out, buddy.
Heavenly Father, Lord, thank you for this day you've given us. Thank you for the opportunity to come and learn tonight. Lord, I pray that what was taught, that we can apply it to our lives, that we can do right even when our leaders are not around, that we may serve you through and through every day. Lord, please be with each and every one.